We've just launched our Voodoo Concept Art pack, which we've been working on over the last few months, which has a massive amount of content to help you create face and body illustrations. We found that there were several techniques that we've been using on nearly every piece of artwork we created for it, so we thought we'd share them with you as they're super powerful to know. We're going to focus on controlling our illustration layers using a combination of clipping, layer and group masks, and we're also going to fly through them in 4 of the most popular illustration apps: Procreate, Photoshop, Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo, all in one go. Some of these techniques work very similarly in all 4 and may even apply to other software that we're not covering here, like Clip Studio Paint. But if you're anything like us and need to work in several different apps, or are simply curious considering switching apps, then take a peek and hopefully you'll pick up something new here. While you don't need our new Voodoo pack for any of the tricks here, we have a link below if you'd like to check it out. It includes over 150 brushes, dozens of head and body stamp rotations and loads of unique bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. Clipping is such a simple but powerful technique. To do this, right-click on the layer name, not the thumbnail, and choose Create Clipping Mask, or instead use the shortcut Command or Control plus Alt plus G. When a layer is clipped to the one below, anything you paint on it stays inside the lines of the bottom layer. If we turn off the clipping mask, you can see how messy the quick shadows I painted in are, so clipping removes the need to worry about this. You can clip as many layers as you like to the bottom layer. Here, I've quickly painted in a soft color dodge layer and clipped it too. In both Affinity apps, it works a little bit differently, but it's still dead simple. Just drag the layer you want to clip inside the base layer. On iPad, tap the layer you want to clip and choose Clipping Mask. Layer masks are another great option, especially when you don't want to or have a layer below to clip to. With the layer selected, if I click on the Create Layer Mask icon, it creates a layer mask. Anywhere that's white on the layer mask shows through the masked layer. Anywhere that's black hides it, and any shades of grey in between relate to how opaque the parts that are shown are. With the mask selected, if I draw in black on the mask, it will hide that part of the red circle. If I disable the mask for a second, you can see the original circle stays completely untouched the entire time. This is incredibly useful if I ever want to redo some of the masking at a later date, as it's completely non-destructive. Take our Hanzo illustration. If I select just the blue hair layer and create a mask and start painting in black with one of our rake brushes, you can see how it appears to erase the hair parts. This is a neat trick as it effectively allows you to use any paintbrush as a non-destructive eraser. In the Affinity apps, this is nearly identical. Select your layer, click on the Mask Layer button and you can start masking. In Procreate, tap on the layer and choose Mask and you'll see this appear above the target layer. Let's say we want to freely paint over multiple areas of our illustration at the same time. This could be creating an overall shadow layer or adding a texture to your entire illustration. Here I'll just turn off our effects layer group for now and roughly paint in a color dodge layer to add some light to the overall image. This looks okay on the white background, however, if we change the background color to something different, we can see where the soft brush of the dodge goes outside the artwork silhouette. Sometimes you might want this, but in this case we want to use the finished image on different colored backgrounds. We can't clip it to any one layer because our layers are too complex and spread out. We could add a layer mask to the dodge layer and then paint out the parts we don't want, but that's a little bit time consuming. Instead, we're going to create a new folder and drop our dodge layer into it. Now, if we hold Command or Control plus Shift and then click on each of the layer thumbnails of our main illustration shapes, we can add to a selection until we have our entire silhouette. Making sure we have the folder selected, we can click the layer mask button and it will not only create a layer mask on the folder, but it will automatically fill in the right areas for us because we had the selection made when we created it. This trick of having a selection made before creating a mask on individual layers works too. Now, any layers we keep in this folder will have their contents masked to fit inside the silhouette. This is an extremely powerful technique, not to mention it has the bonus of helping us keep our projects nicely organised and easier to navigate. As a quick example and a bonus trick, I want to add some noise to our overall illustration. I'll create a new layer, fill it with white, then I'll go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Let's set the amount to 20%, uniform and monochromatic. If I change the layer blend mode to linear burn and lower the opacity, it adds a nice look to the piece. I can see the noise in my background color, which I don't want, so all I need to do is drop it into the mask group folder and it clips inside our silhouette perfectly. In the Affinity apps, this is very similar. It's just presented in the layers panel slightly differently. If I select the layer or layers I want in the group, I'll press Command or Control plus G to create a group. Just like in Photoshop, if I hold Command or Control plus Shift, I can then click on the layer thumbnails I want to include in my selection until I've got my full silhouette. I just click the mask layer icon and we're good to go. Finally, let's look at Procreate for this. Now, while you can create groups of layers in Procreate, you unfortunately can't apply masks to the group folders themselves, only actual artwork layers. This is something I'd love to see in the next version of Procreate because of how useful it is, but here's a workaround that will save you a lot of time on more complex pieces. On our illustration, you can see that my face shadows, color dodge and noise layers all appear outside of my illustration outlines. If we tap on the face layer and then choose Select, Procreate will add a selection mask on its outline. One powerful feature in Procreate is being able to save the selection to reuse it as often as we like. Tap on the Save and Load and on the plus icon and it'll be saved as a selection. If I deselect everything for now, go to my face shadows layer and then tap the Select menu, I can go to Save and load up the mask selection and choose Mask to create a layer mask with the right parts automatically filled in. One limitation is you can only use the Select from Thumbnail option on one layer at a time. So what if we want to create an overall silhouette of our entire illustration? And what if we have 30 different layers already? Well, here's a trick for you. First, I'm going to turn off any layers for the minute that won't be part of the silhouette I want, including the background, so we're left with something like this. Opening the Actions menu, going to Add, we're going to tap on Copy Canvas and then Paste straight away. Copy Canvas copies everything that's visible on screen, merges it into one layer. We can see the new merged image in our Layers panel. We can tap on this and choose Select to create a perfect silhouette selection. If I go back to Save and Load and add this selection, we can now delete the merged layer as we no longer need it for anything. With my selection active, I can now go to my color dodge layer and mask it, and do the same with my noise layer. While it's obviously not quite as efficient as having a single masked folder, it's still pretty cool to be able to create and recall selections at any point of the process. Here's a bonus tip for you for creating your flat artwork areas that serve as the foundation for building up all of your artwork layers. It's straightforward, but there can be a few minor annoyances that can trip you up a little at times. This is something that can be done manually, where you just take your time, paint in the shapes. And sometimes this is the only way to do it, especially when you're not using ink outlines. It's not a tip as such, but it can be quicker to carefully draw the edge parts in first, then use one of the lasso tools to select the inside areas and then fill it in. A quicker method is to select your line work layer and then use the magic wand tool to select all the spaces in between the lines before finally switching to the new color fill layer and filling it in. However, there's two caveats with this. First, your lines need to be continuous, as if there's a gap, the selection will leak out through it. Changing your tolerance amount can sometimes help with this. One workaround we use in this instance is to make a copy of the line work layer and then draw to close any gaps. We use this purely for selecting the areas easily and then delete it once we're done. The other issue, especially if you're using a brush for your lines that isn't fully opaque or has a rough edge, is that the selection might be imperfect and leave a tiny gap between the fill and your lines. This is a pretty simple fix, however. When you've got your magic wand selection made, go to Select, Modify, Expand and enter a pixel amount. This will expand the size of the masked area to go under your lines. There's no magic number as it depends on the sizes you're working with, but it usually only needs just a few pixels. Now, when you go to fill again, you should get better results. There will always be a little bit of a manual cleanup needed, but it will be pretty minimal. If you want to save even more time in general, you could consider setting up a Photoshop action to automate these steps so you can run them all with a single button click, but that's for another tutorial. The process in Affinity Designer and Photo is identical, just make sure you're in pixel persona mode in Affinity Designer. Use the Flood Select tool. If you're adding lots of smaller areas to your selection, just make sure that the mode is set to Add, so you'll keep your previous selection each time you click. To solve the same issue as in Photoshop, go to Select, Grow Shrink, and enter a pixel amount to increase the selection very slightly. Now switch to the layer that you want your colour on and select the Flood Fill tool and click in your selection and it should fill nicely. Procreate is a little different and has a cool trick up its sleeve for this. Tap on your line work layer and select Reference. Now, no matter which layer you're drawing on, when you go to colour drop by dragging the current colour directly onto the canvas instead of painting it on, it will stay inside the lines on your reference layer. If you drag to where you want the colour and then pause for a moment without lifting your pencil, you'll see the threshold pop up. Still holding your pencil or finger on the canvas, you can now slide left or right to decrease or increase the threshold, allowing you to decide how far the paint should spread. Just make sure when you're done to turn off the reference layer. Hopefully you found something useful in these tips. If you have any more to share, just drop them in a comment below.